Well, hey, what's going on? This is the brothers from the 818. It is we are back for episode 8, no, 7. Episode 7. My name is Dave, as you know. I'm here with my boy from the way back, from the current, past, and present, and we will definitely head on into the future. Caleb is in the house tonight. What's going on, Caleb?
Hey, what's going on, brother? How you doing, man?
Man, it's one of those days. I'm busy, just moving around. Got a lot of things going on, but my mind it just won't stop, dude. I got just so many thoughts, so many. I'm just looking at this whole situation of what's happening, and I feel like we need to talk. We need to just say what's up.
Situation what's going on in Minnesota, across the nation, regarding George Floyd. I know we touched on it in our last episode because it was breaking news that day.
Yeah. It's been breaking news every day since, man. I mean, unfortunately, when an incident like that occurs, people are going to respond, and our people, I won't just put it on Black folks, man. Just people across the nation. I think I read like 50 cities have just seen some form of protest going on, and some of those protests have been a little more so than others. Some have been just kind of light, candlelight vigils, etc., and some have just gotten way out of control. And that's the part that bothers me, man. I'm looking at this like, we've been here before. What did it do? It was Ferguson. There's L.A. There's Oakland. There's L.A. again. There's Chicago. There's you name the city, folks are just, we're repeating the same cycle, man. And I see it because we're repeating the same cycle because the events that lead up to those cycles are still happening. But I don't know.
Something that I heard last night, I was watching one of the news networks and they were saying that this just feels different than Ferguson. This feels different. It feels like there's a more collective of different races, different people, and it has resonated with people in a way that the other ones didn't. And when I saw that video, I was thinking, man, he's not going to die, man. The police officer is not going to stand on his neck and knee him in the neck, and until he dies, man. There's no way that that's going to happen. Not with the cameras rolling, not with other officers around, not with in the middle of the city. There's no way that that's going to happen. But that's exactly what happened, and I think people are outraged, man.
They are. They're outraged, and I don't want to make light of it. I think we're going to get to it in a little bit, but seeing that happen live on TV, the public perspective is that officer killed him right in front of everybody, and that's true. And I don't mean to laugh at it, but I mean the way the news reports are like, his body was limp when they rolled him over. They couldn't find a pulse while he was en route to the hospital. They were doing whatever they could, and he was pronounced dead at the hospital. So, all that says, yeah, your knee on the neck killed George Floyd in front of everybody, which sucks, right? And that's horrible. That's horrible for George. That's George I think it was a 46-year-old man. I think he had wife and kids, possibly. I know he had some family, and what that means for them is horrible. That's a man that won't come home again. Yeah. Any plans he had for this weekend didn't happen. Any plans he had for a 50th birthday celebration won't occur. These types of things. I mean, life is short anyway, but his was cut short unnecessarily by specific actions of an individual, Derek, what's his name, Chauvin. And before we go too far, last week when we talked about this, it's like we were talking about the mayor of Minnesota Minneapolis saying that the police officers have been fired. I said, I don't want to hear about them being fired. I'm looking for the report that says they've been arrested and that they've been prosecuted and so forth. And, yesterday he got arrested,
Yeah.
which is good news. It doesn't undo anything. I'm not trying to say that, but he did get arrested. He is facing charges, and the charges they listed for him are what? What were they?
I think it was second-degree murder and
third-degree murder. Third,
right.
Which is even worse, right? But worse for us, better for him, meaning third-degree murder is not as bad as first-degree. But they did throw manslaughter on there.
Yeah.
Right? So he's charged with third-degree murder and manslaughter. And now we need to refocus our efforts to making sure there's a conviction, right? Because the other side is there's also a coroner's report.
Yeah, I saw that, man.
Yeah, so the coroner's report is saying there's no evidence of traumatic asphyxia or strangulation, according to the official autopsy. He also had health issues and coronary disease, and maybe that led to his death, which is a huge push, right? They're just saying it's not necessarily he murdered him. Maybe he died in his presence. And I just have to give the gas face on that, man.
It pissed me off when I said that, when I saw that. And, the autopsy, the coroner, they need to do their job, right? And so, that's what the coroner report says. And I'm not sure, I'm not in the medical field. And so I'm not a coroner. And so maybe that report is accurate, right? But everyone else that's looking at it, and then it's probably a good reason for people out there protesting, is saying, no, that police officer stood on his neck until he was no longer breathing. Right. And even if he had health concerns, and to be honest with you, if you 40 years plus, you got health concerns, right? And even if you have health concerns, or even if Floyd had health concerns, right? He didn't die because of those health concerns. The man was healthy when he came out the car. The man was healthy when he sat down outside of that store. And he didn't get back up after the police officer stood over him, or on top of him, for more than 8 minutes, almost 9 minutes.
Right. And that's where the rage comes from, because as you said, he was healthy enough to get to his next destination if those situations hadn't occurred. And so, yeah, whether the autopsy says, it was strangulation or what have you, the fact that someone had a knee on his neck for 8 minutes caused his death. Regardless of what else was happening in his body that exacerbated it or made it worse, or whatever the scenario is, had he not had a knee on his neck for those 8, almost 9 minutes, he would have made it to his next destination. And so,
I know we're gonna get into it, but because we're talking about the knee and the neck, and haven't moved from the police officer and the actual situation that caused Mr. Floyd's death, I was moved by something that President Obama posted about from a middle-aged African-American businessman. And I'll read the quote. It says, dude, I got to tell you, the George Floyd incident in Minnesota hurt. I cried when I saw that video. It broke me down. The knee on the neck is a metaphor for how the system so cavalierly holds Black people or Black folks down, ignoring the cries for help. People don't care. Tragic, truly tragic. And so when I read that, I was thinking about the metaphor. That's what resonated with me, right? And the officer, it seemed like as if Floyd's life didn't matter, man. And when I was watching that video, I saw myself there, man. And it pained me because I saw how helpless he was. And again, this was happening in the middle of the city, in the middle of the day, sunlight still out, people videotaping it, and that officer and the other officers with that officer could care less about that man's life, man. And it pains me in a way that I'm still trying to come up with words that is appropriate for a setting like this.
Well, the reason you struggle with finding words that are appropriate is because there are none. There's not a word you can come up with. I can't imagine anyone. Well, I guess I could imagine anyone, but people I know, people you know, definitely me. When I saw that video, it was just like, am I seeing what I think I'm seeing? Is this really? Yep, this is what's happening, and this is live, and you can see the expression on the guy's face, and you can see the cop standing by, just kind of, got his lens on, kind of looking around, making sure nobody's going to come at them. No one stopped to grab the officer and say, hey, you're doing too much.
Right.
At least from their side. And these are trained individuals. And so when you see things like that and you walk past a mirror and catch yourself, you're like, man, that could have been me. That could have been somebody I know. That could have been my child, in any number of circumstances. And, it kind of reminds me, I remember back in 91, 92, when the LA riots happened.
Rodney King.
Yeah, Rodney King and Reginald Denny was pulled out the truck and so forth. I was up in the Bay, and things got a little weird up there, but nothing got tore up. People were just kind of out in the street doing their thing. They didn't respond to the degree that LA did. But my mom called me, and she was like, "Where you at?" And I was like, well, hey, Mom, how are you? Because, I'm 21, 22, something like that. And she's like, where you at? I'm like, I'm at home. She's like, I need you to stay home. I'm like, why? And she's like, because they're out here tearing up the streets and da-da-da-da-da. I was like, Mom, I don't even live in LA. I'm a long way away. And she's like, no, wherever you are, I just need you to stay home, because I'm worried about you. I'm worried about what would happen if you're in the streets. And at the time, I was like, okay, because I wasn't trying to get in the streets anyway. But it wasn't until a couple of days ago that clicked with me, because I was watching the news. The mayor from Atlanta, I don't know if you caught her, her comments, Keisha Lance Bottoms. And, and her first comments were, I have sons at home, and I have an 18-year-old, and I called him and told him to stay home because I can't protect you if you're in these streets. And I was just like, man, and again, this was a long time ago. We're talking 25 plus years. But when that occurred, it resonated back to me because I'm a parent now and have been a parent. My oldest is 24, right? And I called and checked on him. Hey, what's going on? Where you at? How you doing? I'm just at home chilling. Things getting ugly out there? Nah, things are cool. Okay, well, just stay in the house for a little while, And he's like, oh yeah, I'm not going anywhere. It's too ugly out there. It could blow up. And I get that now, because like any number of situations, you could be on the wrong side of some officer's day. I won't even say bad day. You could just be on the wrong side of their day, and all plans are off after that, right?
I saw the mayor and from Atlanta, and I thought it was a passionate. Message that she was trying to send to her fellow citizens. My daughter, she lives in Atlanta. I called her. I couldn't reach her. I was like, oh man, let me try some other options. And so I texted her, and then finally she said, no, we're in the house, right? We're not going out. And so that pleased me because I was concerned about her. I know that there's been other times, there's been other incidents in which she went out and she protested. But this one, this felt different. And I wanted, last night, I needed to make sure that she was at home, and she reassured me that she was going to be at home. And, when Rodney King's, when Los Angeles was rioting, I was in Los Angeles. I was a 21, 22-year-old, just like you. Um, and I didn't go to Los Angeles proper. I didn't go to downtown, but I got out the house, right? And I saw the looting. I saw what was going on in the city. And I'm just glad that for our sake, that our children didn't respond the way that I responded with Rodney King.
Right. And, and that's a perfect, leap into the whole next point. For years, and when I say years, we're going way, way back, much farther back than Martin Luther King and there's been moments where a person has to stand up for what they feel is right. That's called war, right? That's called anytime the country has gone to war, had any type of skirmish or any type of disagreement, it's because someone is standing up for what they feel is right. I'm all for that. I think as a people, we need to make a stand. I think we need to just be able to publicly say this is not okay. We need to be able to demand justice for not only George Floyd and his family, but Ahmaud Arbery and his family, and for everyone else. What's her name? Bernice Taylor and her family, and everyone. We need to be able to demand justice.
On and on, right?
On and on, right? But there's a way and a reality that you need to accept. And I'm just gonna come right out with it. If you're gonna publicly protest, if you're going to stand your ground, if you're going to activate your constitutional rights to publicly protest, I'm all for that. If you want to be about your freedom of speech, I am all for that. I think that is the right of every human, and you should be able to get down like that. As soon as your rage channels farther than that, and it becomes violence / aggression / with the intent or the notion of doing damage to public property or people, you have to realize that there will be consequences, right? And if you're willing to accept those consequences, move forward. But you don't get to then say, how am I being violated now? Why am I being arrested because I participated in this? Because what you participated in was wrong. The protest was right. The peaceful stand was right. The stand your ground was right. And again, if I read some, so it's not all us. I read that in some cities, police are peppering the crowd with pepper spray and rubber bullets, trying to disperse, and they're using what they call non-lethal means, in some cases lethal means, to disperse the crowd, and people are fighting back. I even get that too. But some folks are showing up with the brick, throwing it through the window, running through Target, grabbing what they can, grabbing a spray can on the way out so they can deface the CNN building. I'm like, that's where your rage goes too far. Now you're uncontrollable, right? And if that's your action, then again, carry forth with your righteous indignation, if that's what you want to call it, but realize that there are consequences to go along with that.
Yeah, it reminds me of my 3-year-old. My 3-year-old would do something, and I'll react, because before she did it, I told her, I said, sit down. And then she'll do something and she'll spill water on the floor. And I'll say, why is there water on the floor? Right? Well, it's because I was trying to reach for, but if you would have just listened to me, right? But she's trying to give me a justification. There's no justification for breaking windows, looting, throwing bricks. There's no justification for that if you plan to do a peaceful protest, right? If you plan to loot, destroy property, assault others, then if that's your MO, then okay. Just know that there are consequences for it, and I certainly don't support that. I support the ability to go out and protest this horrible murder of George Floyd.
Yeah, and I think we have to keep saying that name. We have to keep that name live on our tongues, because what's going to happen is what always happens: is something else will occur, and it's going to lessen how we feel about this, right? And it shouldn't. We should hold on to that feeling, and not so that we can remain an angry people, but anger can produce a whole lot of progress that doesn't necessarily mean aggression and violence. Anger can drive you. Anger can make you purposeful. Anger can make you a lot of different things, and it doesn't necessarily have to be negative, right? And so I see this situation, and I say, one, again, like I said last week, I've had my talk with my 24-year-old. I set my 13 and my 14-year-old down and had a talk with them. And they're like, Dad, we would never be a part of that. I know, because you're 13, 14, but when you're 17, 18, maybe you'll be a part, maybe it's a little different. When you're 25 and 26, maybe it's a little different. And I'm still going to need to have those conversations with you to refresh this point, because it's still wrong. The action is wrong. The reaction is wrong. None of them are right. And in the end, you still lose. Right. And not because the system is racked against you and so forth and so on, but if you go make your stand, choose to do this, blah, 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 get arrested, so forth and so on, now you have a record, you just lost. Right. And there's ways to win.
Yeah. And you're talking about right and wrong, right? We've been talking about right and wrong for the last 3-4 minutes, right? It makes me think about, like, I'm not angry. How do I want to say this, man? Because I'm about to shift to President Trump. And so I'm not angry with him, but I find myself more often than not is just disappointed. Like, disappointed in the opportunity that he has to make a positive change on his country. And I am convinced that that is not his agenda. He does not care about doing that. It seems more self-serving and more selfish for him. And so some of his remarks, man, it didn't make me angry. I was just like disappointed, man. I'm just frustrated. Like, if you don't have anything, brother, if you don't have anything good to say, man, sometimes it's just best for you to be quiet. And so with him calling people thugs and saying that it's dishonoring the memory of George Floyd, I just don't think that he gets it, right? I don't think that he gets it. I think that there was a better response, even if that response was, we're tracking the situation in Minneapolis. We know that I've been in contact with the mayor and the governor, and my heart and prayers goes out to the family. It doesn't have to always throw fuel to the fire, man. He doesn't always have to be incendiary in his responses, but it seems as if he's so cavalier, and we read that in the quote. He's so cavalier, and he just doesn't care. And more concerning to me, because I continue to say it while I'm on this podcast, is that I'm a patriot, man. I served this country for 25 years, right? And I believe in the Constitution, and I want people to be able to act on those freedoms, right? But I also expect leadership, man, and I'm not seeing it, and I haven't seen it from him the way that I would hope our president of the United States would represent this nation and all the people in this nation, not just those of the rich, not just those of power and influence, not just those of that are white, but all of the citizens of the United States.
I feel you there. I think that I was going to actually fix my lips to say I don't blame Trump. I do. Like you, I'm not angry with him. It's a frustration, and it's a, how low can you go? He reminds me of a person who, at the end of the campfire, grabs the first liquid he can that's available and throws it on the fire to put it out. And then when it engulfs in flames, he remembers, I was drinking 151. Right. Let me now go back and try to clean up this mess I made. Whereas if he had just thought about it first, even in a disingenuous manner, he could have said something a whole lot better than referring to those individuals as thugs. And then I think his quote was, when the looting starts, the shooting starts.
Right.
Like, really?
And he doubled down on that, man.
Commander-in-chief of your own country, and you just said, this is exactly what we're going to do. He wasn't referring to, the Ukraine or anywhere outside of this country. He was
Right.
referring to Minneapolis.
Right. And he doubled down on that statement, man. And the next day he was defending it and saying, well, it's factual. Right.
Yeah.
And just more disappointing because, he doesn't take any credibility or ownership of any of his missteps. And I think that's one of the most frustrating things that I have with him. Like, if you're wrong, say you're wrong, brother. If you're wrong, admit it and correct your statement. Soften it so that you could at least so that it will at least appear that you're representing all the people of your country and not just yourself and those that are in your inner circle.
Agreed. You mentioned Trump. You even mentioned Obama and him quoting the middle-aged African American businessman. I like what Obama had to say about the new normal.
Yeah.
And what he says, it falls on all of us, regardless of our race or station, including the majority of men and women in law enforcement who take pride in doing their job the right way every day, to work together to create a new normal in which the legacy of bigotry and unequal treatment no longer infects our institutions or our hearts. And I was like, one, bravo. Two, I appreciate the fact that he paused before he made a statement and recognizes the authority of his voice during this time. A lot of people are going to see that and be reminded that, everyone's not all bad, everyone's not all good. But and tomorrow or whatever date it is to occur, we still all have to work together, because this isn't our only crisis right now. We're still trying to figure out how to come out of COVID-19. We're still trying to rebound from the worst unemployment crisis ever. We're still trying to get over all of this and still establish a new normal. Now's not the time to break it all down, is really what I took from that. And I was like, wow, that's what I'm talking about. If you're going to have a few words to say, make those few words important. Make sure they hit the point home. And we'll see, where that goes. I think we're in day 3 or so of the, maybe even more, of the looting, the rioting, and so forth. And I think it's calming down a little bit. I know they rolled the National Guard out there, which is a sad state of affairs. And I hope that's enough to just calm people down and let them go home. Because the bubble hasn't hit. Remember the sine wave I talked about. So it hit a peak with the murder, and then it kind of went down and then came back up with the rioting, and people began to focus more on the rioting, but then were quiet about the murder, right? And now there has to be the court case, right? And God forbid he gets off or gets a sentence that's any lighter than anyone should feel it should be, because it has a chance of sparking back up. So how do we prepare our environment in the meantime for what we know is a possibility for what will occur?
Yeah, before we go there, and I wanted to just touch on Obama, because Obama has just kind of always been kind of cool and collected, right? And level-headed. And, maybe I'm getting recency biased as well, because when I hear him speak, that's what I want our leaders in our country, not just our president, but all of our leaders in our country to sound like, right? I want them to be thinking of the collective. And so maybe it's recency bias, but bravo for him. Bravo for his response. And I know that there's other people that responded as well, and we'll get to that. Our last podcast, we talked about what needs to change, and so some of the things that you talked about tonight are some of the things that we're still talking about, like what needs to change. I mentioned activism from non-Blacks, and so we've seen some of that. Political reform, I'm waiting to see more of that. Officers to speak out, and officers to speak out, and I think Obama kind of hit on that a little bit, because there are people in those locker rooms that can just say, hey man, enough is enough, and cross the blue line. and say, you know what, this might cost me my career, but I got into this career field to protect and serve. And if I can't do that by being silent, then I'm not going to be. This is not the career field for me. And so you just touched on judicial reform, and that goes hand in hand with the politicians. In order for this police officer to for justice to be served, the courts have to do right by Mr. Floyd. And we also talked about the officers need to be charged. And so that's happened. I'm really happy about that. And then the last thing I mentioned was the racial divide. And I'll go back to it. I'm glad to see the number of people out there protesting. And I'm glad that I saw them show up to the White House too. Hopefully Donald Trump didn't get a good night's sleep, because people were outside his window, like you said, chanting. Some of them was inappropriate. Some of them had crossed the line, throwing bricks and stuff, and assaulting officers. But hopefully he'll think twice before he just recklessly throw out comments such as calling angry people, reacting to a video showing a police officer murdering someone in the street pointlessly. You can't call them thugs, man. They're angry for a reason. There's a good reason why people are angry, right. And because we've seen this time and time again, and we haven't seen justice be served.
Right. Yeah, that's real. They're angry for a reason. Now, the movement, the protest, the entire situation is in response to the murder, is in response to Officer Clavin, is it Clavin? Whatever his name is, having his knee on George Floyd's neck. What happens next is the outreach of people who can't express themselves, or who don't know how to express themselves in other ways. And some of them are peacefully protesting. Some are just there. Some are taking it too far. Some, are zipping around everybody else because they want to be the first one to break a window and get in somewhere to get what they get. You got all kind of people out there, and to just blatantly say these thugs is irresponsible.
Right.
And here's the other thing. If you, I, or anyone else were to go, we'll go back. Remember the woman in the park who called the police on the black man for bird watching, right? Her job saw the video and fired her.
Good for them.
Right? Good for them, because they don't want their name associated with that type of activity, right? Trump should be fired.
Clavin's wife actually filed for divorce.
She did?
Yeah, she filed for divorce, yeah.
But I don't know if you heard what I said. Trump should be fired. Right? Because if you can go out and say, nobody has that authority, right? But if you can go out and just say something like that so boldly,
right,
and because no one's going to doubt or dispute that when the President of the United States speaks, he has the authority to speak on behalf of the President of of the country of the United States.
Right. But he's not representing us. That's the problem.
He's not. He's supposed to.
Right.
Right. And all the people, black, white, and everybody else, there's some Trump supporters out there, sure. But all the people, no matter what race, are speaking up saying, hey, he doesn't speak for me. He doesn't speak for me. He doesn't speak for me. But, he does, because he's the person at the negotiating table. He's the person that's going to other countries. He's the person that's meeting with other leaders representing this country.
Right.
So if he's going to go on and boldly say something like that, there should be somebody that calls him up and says, we're in the Oval Office. You need to come on by. We'll send you your things in a box, and we're escorting you off the premises.
Right. I heard someone criticize the mayor of Atlanta response, and I listened to the criticism, and I said, okay, that's fair. She, in a part of her response, she said, a way to fix this is to actually go out and vote. go out and
Mhm.
vote on, I don't know, July 8th or June 8th, and go out and vote in October, right?
Mhm.
But to be honest with you, and the criticism was fair. I think it was kind of ticky tack, right? But it was fair. It said, you know, voting would not have changed the death of Floyd, right? Voting on June 9th or in October is not going to change the death of Floyd. We need to change policies in order to change that, right? We need to change the culture and the racism and the bigotry and the divide in our country in order to at least reduce the chances of more citizens, innocent citizens, being murdered like they're in some third world country illegally and caught by a militant group, right? Because that's not the way that our citizens in the United States should be handled, even if they were or are wrong, right? It shouldn't have to cost them his life for whatever reason that they showed up, right? And our president, we should expect more from our president. And so I do think that people should be conscious and people should go out and vote. And if you're sick and tired of the direction that we're going, then that's your opportunity to at least have a vote in changing it.
Yeah, I hear. I didn't happen to hear or see the criticism of her report. Um, I think what she said is vital. It doesn't address the mindset at the time, and that's
Hmm.
where I think the fairness
Hmm.
comes from. It's easy to say, oh, you don't like that this happened. It could be anything. You don't. There's not stoplight at the intersection, and somebody got in a car accident. Oh, you don't like that? You should go to city council and vote. Yeah, I should. Doesn't change the fact of what just happened.
Right,
You
right,
have
right.
to give me a minute to deal with the fact of what just happened,
Hmm.
and give me that, and then let's figure out how to make sure it doesn't happen again,
Right.
right? And I think maybe her address was, I don't think it was to voters. I think it was to people who, notoriously voted because they wanted to participate in a movement that could possibly get a black man elected, and it did, and they haven't seen the polls since.
Right,
Right?
right,
And
right,
so,
right.
those are the people that we need to speak to, and black, white, otherwise. I don't think it's about race as much as environment. Or what part of urban America do you happen to live in? It's about social economics to a degree. It is about race as well. I'm not saying race doesn't have to do with it, but as we look at these environments, the way you enact change
Right.
is through voting, because it's funny. I'm in school, that, and I was just reading today part of one of my assignments, and the professor said something to the effect of the parties that be the incumbents who have already succeeded through the system are going to be very hesitant to seeing any change
Mm.
or allowing any change to occur. And I had to pause. I was like, is he talking about class, or is he talking about whatever is going on in this world? Because the bottom line is the parties that are in power right now have had much success just on the way it is.
Right.
They're not looking for a continuation of equal rights. They're not looking for a breakdown of the bigotry of the police system. They're not looking at an equal access to power at the highest level of offices, because that's not the system they succeeded in.
Right, right, right.
Right? And
You
they're
know,
going to resist that change.
before our viewers go up in arms, because we're talking about two different things. We're talking about elections and political systems and stuff, and then we're also talking about George Floyd. And I believe that um, the police responded that way, and that police response was due to his race.
Oh, yeah.
Because and so I don't want any confusion about that. I was having a conversation that said about, you just don't see the same level of violence and aggression to other races. You don't see it towards whites. You don't see it towards Asians. You don't see it towards even Hispanics, who are people of color, right? You just see a different level of aggression towards African Americans, right? And so so we need to continue to address that disproportionality that affects the Black community.
Right. And I hear that. I never want to take my foot or finger off the pulse of, this is something that is primarily or disproportionately affecting the Black community. I also want to recognize where it has occurred in other places, because those are our allies as well. And so stopping one limits the other as well. And if we and bigotry and the power structure that says every other thing that's not white is bad affects us all. And
Right.
so part of the movement, and part of even a lot of the articles that we've been seeing, a lot of the responses, is, as an allied group, what can we do? As a group that wants to support, how do we help? Where is our voice? What do we need to do? You mentioned earlier, it starts in the locker room, right?
Right.
The locker room isn't all white, it's all blue, right?
Right.
And so being that they're there, a lot of times I wonder, I've never been in the police locker room, but I wonder, are there conversations that non-white officers, non-white men and women in blue don't engage in because they don't want to be singled out? Or do they? I have no idea.
Right.
Right?
Right.
All I know is I look at the 4 officers who were there, and no one did anything to stop the one from killing George Floyd.
Right. And so we see politicians get out there, and we see the mayor would get out there, and we see governors get out there, and we'll see former presidents get out there, and we'll see activists get out there and call it what it is. But we don't. It was very rare that we see the police force, the chiefs and the leaders in those police forces, to say, "Hey, this was horrific. And I apologize that it happened. I'm appalled that it happened under my watch, right? And I will do everything within my power, with my ability, to make sure that this doesn't happen again." The police chiefs and the officers just don't go out there and make themselves vulnerable that way.
Right.
But there are other people that's doing it, and so there's other activists that we've heard from since this, and one of them is someone that been in the news quite a bit about issues in the Black community, and that's Colin Kaepernick. Did you catch what he tweeted and what he said about the incident?
I did. He the first thing I saw was and I keep smiling. It's not because it's funny. I find it interesting. The first thing I saw was, we admonish this, and it showed Colin Kaepernick kneeling, but we support this, and it showed the officer kneeling on George Floyd's neck, and it was like, right. And then he put out a quote. I think I don't know if he tweeted it or not.
I think
but he did put out a quote about it.
Yeah, and so something that often we say, put your money where your mouth is, right? Mm-hmm. And he's done that. He has a number of community organizations or initiatives that he supports, and so something that he's done in regards to the protesters for George Floyd is he is providing legal funds for them. And so that is really him putting his money where his mouth is. And I think that, we need more celebrities, more people of influence to come out and speak on this stuff. I think that last week, I don't know if we caught it live or if it was after when we were talking to Verb, but we talked about the hip hop community, right? The hip hop community used to be very responsive when this stuff took place, and we just don't see it anymore. And in my opinion, and I think in our opinion, the hip hop community has kind of softened their voice because of the economic impact. If they say something and their label is displeased with it, or their supporters or the people that are buying their music is displeased with it, they could lose potential money. But back in the day, hip hop or rap rappers, right? They used to get at it. They used
Right.
to speak on these community issues, and they did not let it go silent. And I think that now, even more so because of social media, we have the music entertainers, right? But we also have the sports industry, right? And we have the movie industry, and we have businessmen that could go out there and speak on it and without fear, and then make what I'm feeling more normal, right? Normalize, make it, go ahead and express your feelings, and so that other people that are expressing it can say, you know what, that's exactly how I feel, and I'm not on an island. That just reaffirms that I'm not on the island, that I'm not looking at this sideways. And so I wish that we saw more of that.
I agree. And man, there's so much I want to say on that. I'm really trying not to target anyone in a negative fashion. Let me just say this about Colin though, and it's nothing negative. Not only did he put his money where his mouth is, but he solicited the assistance of the, what is it, the We Know Your Rights campaign.
Mm-hmm.
And they're backed by, I want to say, 5 of the top legal defense attorneys in America,
Wow.
where his money is not only just bailing people out, but going towards legal defense funds with
Mm-hmm.
highly capable lawyers that can not only defend their client, but address the issue,
Right.
right? And so it's not just, let me just throw money at the situation, but it's strategic in that, let me put the money where it's going to not only do some good for the individual, but help the movement as a whole. So, so I applaud Colin on that one, and just him being able to step up and do that.
Hey, let me say this, because Verb is going to get back at me, because we've had a lot of conversations about Colin Kaepernick. I don't always agree with Colin Kaepernick. I didn't agree with his approach while he was still an NFL player. I didn't think that he should have taken a knee. I thought that the way that he went about it really took away some of his leverage, because if he was still a star quarterback and not creating issues, right? He had a microphone and a camera in front of him every day after practice and every day after a game. And I think that when he started to create waves for himself, he moved further and further in the background, right? And then he just appeared to be like a troublemaker. And so I don't always agree with his approach, but I do love the fact that he is about it, right? He is about it, and I don't think that we should all be working on the same in a linear direction to address these problems. I think that we could address these problems in a number of different ways. And so, again, to Verb, when he checks us out, Colin Kaepernick was a below average quarterback with a great athletic ability.
Shout out taken. I too, and we've had this discussion. I don't necessarily think it needs to revisit there, but I'm not a Colin Kaepernick fan at all. And I disagree with a lot of pieces of the movement and how he did it. Now, what happened afterwards allowed America to expose a weakness to something that we had tended to turn a blind eye against.
Right. If no one else is saying it, I'm glad that Colin Kaepernick is bold enough to call people out for it, right? Because but my hope is that other people will look at their success and look at their celebrity and say, you know what, I've made enough money, right? Let me just do something that feels right, right? It's not about the money anymore. Right. But I've never made $20 million in a year, and so I can't speak from that perspective. But and so maybe making that decision or making that call is harder. I just can't, from my porch, I just can't see me sitting silent when I see these injustices taking place in our communities.
I hear you. And I think, I'm not trying to pat myself on the back or you either, but, this is part of us not sitting silent.
Right, right,
This
right.
is part of us, speaking on this. There's some times in life where I'm going to participate as a social activist, but in my day to day, that's not me. I'm not a social activist. That's not my calling. Which doesn't mean I don't answer the call of social activism should the issue arise. And this is one of those issues. This is one of those issues where um, you should not remain silent. Now, does that mean everybody jumps on the podcast? No. Does that mean everyone goes and grabs a mic and gets in front of somebody? No. It doesn't mean that you all go participate in a protest. But you realize that this part of your part of the noise you need to make is called education.
Right.
You need to make sure others around you, regardless of your race, socioeconomic background, employment status, or position, you need to make sure others around you are aware that this is an issue. And just because it doesn't affect people who look like you doesn't mean it's not an issue. If we're going to focus on right is right and wrong is wrong, then we have to make sure that we address right and wrong
Right.
and call it for what it is.
We've been doing this podcast for 7 weeks, and so in no way are we obligated to speak on this as if we're some authority, right? But I feel that this is right for us to speak on it because it's a current event and it resonated with us. And one thing that we wanted to bring to our audience is conversations that you and I would normally have over the phone, face to face, and bring it to our audience and bring them into the conversation so that they could have an opinion. We're no subject matter experts on any of these topics, but we do have an opinion. And so I feel like if we, as we are committed to get to 100 episodes and continue to share our thoughts on issues in our community, then we have to speak up on issues like this. And if we don't, then we probably shouldn't have a podcast.
Oh, exactly. Yeah, I don't want to have a flavored water podcast at all. I want it to have some kind of hit to it, and that's it. I like the way you put it. We're not experts. We're not trying to position ourselves as experts, but as we've always said, these are conversations that you and I have had for the better of 4 decades now.
Yeah.
Right. And so we're just making them public. We're now saying, hey, have a listen into the types of things we talk about, not for the celebration of you and I talking about them, but some of these are real issues. Some of these are and forget some of these. This is a real issue. This is one of those that I'm praying that someone hears it and says, I didn't see it like that, or I hear you, or I disagree, and it stimulates some more conversation because that's the point. The point is that we can't be silent about this, and the longer we sit around and say nothing, then nothing's being done.
Yeah, we could do this. We could do this. We could do this for another hour. There's. I know Roger Goodell just released something while we've been talking, right? Yeah. And I know that there's other people that have that has responded to George Floyd's death. And there is so it affects. It's like a peel in an onion bag. There's so many layers to it, right? Yeah. And so we could do this for hours and continue to talk about what needs to happen, what I would like to see happen, and my issues that I see with our politicians and our men and women in blue, but I feel like we are going to have another opportunity to do that. I am happy to see some cities respond more appropriately. I like what I've seen in Los Angeles so far. And I'm really proud of Los Angeles over the past couple years. Like Los Angeles police forces have really stayed out of the news and have avoided the senseless deaths and murders that has hit the national news the way that in comparison to some of the other states. And so I'm proud as an Angelino, I'm proud that our police force is doing better. I feel like there's always work to be done there, right? I live in the Antelope Valley now, but from the 818, and there's certainly issues in the community that I live in, but I feel like Los Angeles response was appropriate for the protests and the concerns that followed George Floyd's death.
Agreed, and I was really pleased to see that the big protest we had here, I want to say it was maybe Wednesday or Thursday night, lasted a few hours. At the end, there were no arrests made. Right, I thought that was a good thing. I think there were some people restrained. There were some people even detained. Definitely know there was a police car that was completely vandalized,
right.
Et cetera. And I'm not saying no one got hurt, but no one was arrested. Anyone who was there that didn't have to go to the hospital ended up, and I just shouldn't laugh. I'm making the difference between they didn't go to jail.
Right.
And I am proud. I can't say this often, but proud to be an Angelino for that.
Right.
That our city is not on the news for that this time.
Right. I feel like our police force is approaching this with a little grace. They understand it. They understand where it's coming from, and they know that it's not personal. It didn't happen in their backyard, right? But they represent a career field that is often under scrutiny, right? And so I'm glad that they handled it with grace and some dignity and some professionalism. And I don't know if where that's coming from. I'm guessing it came from all those other riots that you spoke on earlier, and some of the police reform that we've done in our state. But I'm glad to see it.
Yeah, definitely glad to see it. And it says that, it is a sign that things can change. Is it a sign that things are changing? I think it's too early to tell, but it's a sign that things can change. And that's a start. That's truly a start. So, we're operating on what I'm going to call grace time right now. So what I do want to throw in, no pun intended, is you're a man of prayer. I'm a man of prayer. And for any of our listeners, I'm encouraging you, if you know about prayer, if you believe in God or any higher authority, now's the time. I think prayer is important right now. Our land needs healing. And a lot of times, in my darkest days, it was the prayers that I put forth or that others put forth for me that allowed me to wake up and see a different view and come up with a better plan. A lot of times we run around, trying to figure out something because we're doing it on our own accord and we just haven't sought guidance. And so, pray. Now's the time. Now's not the time to decrease your prayer. And as part of your prayer, we have to pray for the leaders, right? Whether you like Trump, forget you. For me, whether I like Trump or not, I pray for him. Whether I like this administration, I pray for it. Whether I feel about, this governor, that mayor, you have to pray for these people to be able to make appropriate decisions in times like this, because that's what we need. And that's where I would love to see God's response really come through and be strong.
And I pray for this country. I pray for our leadership. I pray for Donald Trump. I pray for the family of George Floyd, and for them to be able to kind of make some sense out of what happened on Tuesday. And hopefully as a nation, we will be better. Hopefully we will be better. This is another, but it's been said many times, man. It's been said many times. Maybe this will be it. Maybe this will be it. And so, as a member of the Black community, as an African American in the United States, I'm tired. I'm tired of being tired. I'm tired of waiting for our systems to self-correct or to recognize us as an equal. So, but yeah, man, you got to stay lifted up in prayer. And if you're not doing that, then I think that if you're not in prayer, then those other emotions take over, and then you're throwing bricks and you're breaking windows and you're looting and you're punching and you're doing things that are criminal. And so if you stay lifted up in prayer, then you are doing something, and you're thinking about yourself and everyone. And I often talk about the collective, because that's what it's really about.
I got nothing to say. That I can't think of a better way to close than that. Hey, this has been the brothers from the 818. David, that's Caleb. And we just wanted to let you in and share our thoughts about what's going on. Silence during this time will be ineffective for any of you, for any of us. Use your voice somewhere, somehow, with someone. Educate people on what's actually going on. These situations, if there is any silver lining, it opens the eyes of America to what is truly happening out there. And when you're no longer ignorant, you can engage in some type of purposeful action. Send us any of your feedback to our brothers from the 818@gmail.com. Follow us on Twitter and Instagram at the same. This podcast will be available on 7 or 8 audio streams, as well as YouTube. And we look forward to hearing what you have to say. Until we see you again, stay safe, stay inside. Remember, this whole pandemic that we're dealing with is far from over. And by all means, talk to your children, talk to those around you. We want them to have a better tomorrow than the today that we see. You good, Caleb?
Well, good, brother. Thanks for listening.
Absolutely. Absolutely.